Today started like any other day. When the school bell rang, I was sitting at my desk, doodling in my notebook. While the teacher wrote math problems on the board, I was lost in my own thoughts. But then I noticed something unusual. There was a small note tucked between the pages of my notebook. My heart started racing. With trembling hands, I unfolded the note. It contained only 3 words. Come to the garden at 3. What did this mean? Who had left it? And why me? I glanced around. Everyone in the classroom seemed normal. I turned to my best friend, George, who sat beside me. He was busy solving the equations the teacher had written. Could it have been him? But he didn't seem suspicious. Throughout the entire lesson, I couldn't stop thinking about the note. A few times, the teacher asked me a question, but I was too distracted to respond immediately. My classmates occasionally asked, "What are you thinking about?" But I didn't tell them. If someone was playing a trick on me, I had to find out who it was. When the bell rang, I slung my backpack over my shoulder and stepped into the hallway. I checked my watch. 2:45 p.m. That meant I had 15 minutes before I needed to go to the garden. First, I stopped by the restroom, splashed water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. What's there to be scared of? I muttered to myself. But deep down, I had a strange feeling. Finally, I stepped out into the schoolyard. The sky was overcast, and a gentle breeze was blowing. I walked toward the big oak tree at the back of the yard. Someone had to be there, but no matter how far I walked, I didn't see anyone. Then, I noticed another piece of paper on the ground. I bent down and picked it up. It had only one sentence written in shaky letters. Don't look back. This time, my heart pounded even harder. I froze, trying to sense if anyone was nearby. The wind howled in my ears. I squinted and looked between the trees, but I couldn't see anyone. My hand, which held the note, was shaking. It said, "Don't look back." But how could I resist? My curiosity overpowered my fear, and I slowly turned around. At that moment, a shadow darted out from behind the bushes. I nearly screamed, but then I saw it. George and our friends running toward me, laughing. They shouted, "Got you." At first, my legs were still trembling from fear, but then I let out a deep breath and smiled at them, half annoyed, half amused. "You really scared me," I said. George clapped me on the shoulder, laughing. "You should have seen your face. It was priceless." I started laughing too. We all sat down on the grass, chatting and laughing. But there was still one question lingering in my mind. Had they really left the first note? Just as I was about to ask, we suddenly felt the wind picking up. The branches of the trees creaked as they swayed. Dry leaves swirled through the air. And at that moment, I noticed something. There was an old carving on the tree trunk. I rushed over to examine it. It had a very old date engraved on it, 1953. And underneath, the letters were almost completely faded. But when I looked closely, I could make out the words, "Those who hide here never return." A chill ran down my spine. My friends read it too, and for a moment, we all fell silent. George let out a nervous laugh. "It's just an old carving. Probably something past students wrote for fun." But his voice wavered slightly. At that moment, I made a decision. I had to know the truth about the note. "George, be honest. Did you leave that note?" I asked. George raised an eyebrow. "What note?" I felt a cold shiver. "The little paper I found at my desk, the one that said, 'Come to the garden at 3. George and the others exchanged glances. One of them whispered, "We didn't leave you any note." A gust of wind blew. The bushes rustled. And then I thought I saw a shadow behind the tree. No one spoke. But at that moment, we all realized something. This prank wasn't a prank at all. For a while, we just stood there, looking around in silence. The breeze continued, but the air felt colder. George bent down and picked up the note. When he turned it over, his eyes widened. "Did you write this?" he asked. There was more writing on the back of the paper. But I hadn't written it. We all leaned in to read. Everyone who saw me disappeared. George dropped the paper. Okay, this is getting serious. Someone must be messing with us. But just then, the wind completely stopped. The silence was so intense, it was as if time had frozen. And then, from behind the old oak tree, a tall figure emerged. No one moved. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it would burst from my chest. It was a dark figure, but it was moving. Step by step, it was coming toward us. "Run!" I screamed. All of us took off, sprinting toward the schoolyard's exit. Our footsteps pounded against the dirt. Without looking back even once, we reached the gate. We threw it open and ran out, stopping only when we reached the school entrance, gasping for air. George bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. What was that? Is someone really playing a trick on us, or... He couldn't finish his sentence. Because when we turned back to look at the schoolyard, the figure was gone. But the note was still on the ground. A slight breeze picked it up, and it fluttered out of the school's gates. And at that moment, we all made an unspoken decision. We would never go to the back of the schoolyard again.